road works, planning, health and safety, all that comes into this. But also tells us something else, is that how does this man sleep? How could he sleep if he's worried about this only? If he's worried about this small thing, and he's got all these big issues. How did he manage to run and manage? It shows you about the way of the management systems, that there was a lot of decentralization, a lot of giving authority of people whom he trusted, so that he effectively once has been seen sleeping in the shade of a tree by the ambassador of Persia when he came to Medina, and he was asking about this great Khalifa of these, the Amir al-Mu'mineen, that has put terror in the heart of the Persians and so on. Then when he came and he asked about him, and they say, you'll find him asleep under that tree. And the story, as you know, it says that you have been just, and then you have been comfortable, and you slept well, and he declared that he became a Muslim. Now how could, that tells you that the management style of Umar must have been so well, right, that things were working by themselves almost. He's beaten himself out of a job. He did not have to sign every day, every minute, right, so that he gives authority to people. Now, I may be critical of some bureaucracy and so on in various Muslim countries, but that is a fact. Bureaucracy can kill development. These guys that are from Muslim heritage, there was no bureaucracy. No bureaucracy. The bureaucracy came afterward when the Muslim Ummah, the Muslim civilized, the Muslim states had to become highly centralized during the Ottoman. Right? And the Ottoman had a reason for doing it, because they were in a war situation. They were defending the lands of Islam in Europe and in Russia and in Asia, the problem they had with Iran. So it became a military organization. Military organization has to be run by a centralized authority. Cannot afford to otherwise. Anyway, so the incident of Khalifa Umar, and his story and management is very amazing. The other issue about education and the ability of people to develop awqaf by themselves. Right, they say, this is waqf fi sabilillah, and they do it. And the example I give is the first university in the world, and that is the University of Al-Qarawiyyin, which still exists today, that was built and project managed by Fatima al-Fihri. She was 23 years of age, and she was in the city of Faz in the year 859, more than 1,000 years ago, establishing a university, right, and the funding of it, and the management of building it, and so on. So it shows you that the atmosphere of people that she did not give her money to an awqaf institution, awqaf institution will actually go and do it. She did it by herself, fi sabilillah. But then later, when things have gone on, it became part of the awqaf system. Right? Now, I'm not going to describe the various aspects of the first university in history, and how the concept of chair, kursi, how the concept of graduation, wearing the gown, the wearing of the mortarboard, which is related to the Quran, and so the function of the university and how it is planned and throughout the ages. I'm not going to get into that. I'd like to go into another lady who has done a remarkable project in the same sort of spirit of awqaf, and project managed it, but also individual, but in another way, in a civil engineering way. This project is Darb Zubaydah. Darb Zubaydah, not many people actually know about it, but the lady was the wife of Harun al-Rashid, and she had collected funds and pushed her husband to give money because she wanted to make it easy for the pilgrims, for the Hajjaj, to go from Baghdad all the way to Mecca. It's like producing a highway from Mecca to Baghdad, from Baghdad to Mecca, via Kufa. This is a huge project, please just think about it. It's a huge thing. It cannot be brushed out of history. And until now, you find there are wells they had to dig, and they put a house and they put hotel, and people live there and they go there and have rest. How much reward she must have gained. Until now, you go out of Mecca, in the north of Mecca, you find there is Naba' Zubaydah. You go to Baghdad and near the Kufa, there are Naba' Zubaydah. You go to Yumbu, you go to, they're still available. So that was really an incredible. Now, what is the incentive? You see, in development, as we will come to know, it relies on people. People, human resources, are the biggest asset of any nation. It's the human. I'll give you an example. Japan, they don't have any assets. They don't have oil, no petrol. They've got nothing. People. The people of Japan, they are the asset. They bring in material resource, raw material, they remanufacture, and then they export to the world. That's what it is. After the war, collapse, and then they come out like that. In Germany, it was flattened. The number of bombs that came over Germany are just endless. It's finished Germany in the Second World War. And look where Germany is now. Now, that is people. People who actually are the biggest resource. And I can give you the story of the Japanese motor and how, I don't know whether many of you know about how the Japanese industry started. Right, now, very quick story. A young man, like many of the Omanis, they are sent outside to learn. They get the scholarship, they go to the West, try to get some knowledge, and then go back. Right? So he went there for a PhD in Germany. He went around, looked, and he looked at the motor. Motor is the secret of movement and industry. It just turns around, makes machines, generate electricity and all that. So he wanted to make a Japanese motor. He goes to his ambassador and he says, "Sir, I don't want to do my degree. I want to invest my time in developing a Japanese motor." So what does the ambassador do? He said to him, "Come to me next week." Next week comes, the ambassador gets a broken motor, he put it in the basement in the Sirdab, right? And then when this guy comes in, he says to him, "Can you go and sort this motor out in the basement?" He goes there, repairs it, zzz, working. The ambassador says, okay. He gets in touch with his government in Japan, and they allow this boy to go back to Japan and make this. The scenario now moves on to the Mikado. Mikado is the emperor of Japan. In his memoirs, in his biography, he says, describing this boy, he says, "As I was moving in the corridor in his palace, and I coming close to the room where this boy's 5 motors were, right? And as I came closer, and I hear the noise, the whizzing noise of the motors, I realized that the Japanese symphony has started." See, young person is spirited, believes in his people, believes in the importance of doing that. It became a patriotic issue, and then the wise leader adopts him, and then that's how it works. Similar things can happen. I can tell you stories about a lot of things happen in the recent history. One of them is about Malaysia. At the time of Mahathir, when he first became Prime Minister, I know a person who was my friend. He was from Manchester. He went there, when he finished his PhD, he said, "I want to see the Prime Minister." He went, and they managed to give him an appointment. He went, he said, "Sir, I like to do something for Malaysia. I want to build, I think it's very easy to build chips, microchips. I know how to do it, and I like to do." So he says to him, "Are you married?" He says, "Yes." He said, "Okay, phone your wife and tell her you're not going back home. You're going to be staying in the next door here, next to my office, and you're not going to come out, whether it takes you 1 day, 1 week, or 1 month, or whatever. You're not coming out of there unless you bring me a business plan of how you're going to do this. You have full authority. You can get any money you want. You can contact anybody. You can to Prime Minister's office." Right? So this guy, he goes there, and he lives in that room. And the birth of the Microelectronics Institute of Malaysia, MIMOS, has taken place. In few years' time, Malaysia becomes exporter of microchips. Right? Incredible story. The will of a young person, the spirit, right? He was a good Muslim, this guy. He wants to be good to his country, and then the wise leader adopts him. When there is a leadership and there is a movement in the young people to express their feeling through science and technology and creativity and development, that's how things will happen. It wouldn't happen by just the leader keep pushing people, do this, do that. It needs his people to respond, right? And he also needs to respond to the wish of these people. This is a paradigm that can only be created by the youth and the leadership. Let me move on to something else, which is the catastrophic way the business in the world which is happening now today. Every one of you knows that the system in economics and banking and so on is collapsing very fast. So we are now, in the economic world and in the banking and the money, Horizon 1 is going down. Trying to keep it, it's not going to work. It's collapsing. Pumping so much money, and that's not working. It's a dead horse. Now, why is that? Everybody says it's because of the immoral behavior of the people who are involved in that industry. You get somebody like Madoff, you know the story of Madoff? He steals $5 billion. How could anybody imagine this? One person steals this amount of money. And what kind of system is this? And then you know about the Enron, how many banks have, they just say, sorry, bankrupt. And all our money, your money and my money, everybody, it's just gone. Now they say about Cyprus, right? They say, okay, anybody who has more than £100,000, €100,000 in the bank, 40% is gone. What kind of situation is this? Can this happen in an Islamic situation? But in an Islamic situation, it wouldn't even reach that state. And that's what I'd like to mention to you, that there are some people who are beginning to recognize since the last 30 years, and I know because I know some of them, like the president of our university, he died. Before he died, he was made into a minister, and he became Lord Bowden of Chesterfield. He stood up in the House of Parliament, and he said to people that our economic system is collapsing. I've got his speech. And he says, I'll tell you one thing, we have to make use of the experience of the Muslims. Because when the Roman Empire had collapsed, and it collapsed due to high inflation, they tried all sorts of policies, they could not, they collapsed, and the Caesar had to go and grow cabbages in the Scilly Isles. When Muslims came immediately after the Roman collapse, the world has lived in economic prosperity. There was no inflation in the world. He said, I suggest we understand how they have done it, and please, if we don't adopt it, don't let the Muslims change that. They go and follow our ways, because what they have is something really good. That's what he said. And it's too much detail. I can give you details afterward. I can give you in some of these speeches. Now I want to look at that. And how can one say, how did this world in the past manage to live in an economic stability situation? What kind of development, what kind of institutions? And you find that it is actually the individual behavior, the individual person, the human resource, the quality, the unit quality of a human society is what counts. And I tell you one thing. It is linked also a little bit with Oman. You'd be happy to say. Oman? What has Oman to offer to the world? Stability of the economy of the world? How could the Omanis do that? Well, I'll tell you one thing. The behavior of the Omanis, your great-great-grandfathers before, they had a special characteristic in their trades, the way they used to conduct their business. When I went to Malaysia and went to Indonesia, and I find these people, they have certain characteristics, nice people and so on. They try to find out, how did Islam come to this country? Indonesia is the largest Muslim population. They tell you it's come from places like Oman. They mention the Omani traders, Omani merchants and business people who go out there And, and when you look into this, what was the characteristics of a businessman or a businesswoman in those days? And when you go deeper into that, we've discovered that the word tajir has been invented by the Prophet ﷺ. Now, I may be corrected here, because I'm not an authority on Islam and fiqh, because our organization, our foundation is non-religious, non-political. So we don't go into depths, but we look at it from the development of science and looking at how science and technology has evolved and developed. And then we come and we discover these issues. The word tajir is made out of 4 letters. Before, they used to be called simsar. The Prophet ﷺ says, Antum al-tujjar. Tajir, also mentioned in the Quran, tijaratun. Now, if those of you who have got in-depth knowledge of where these things come from, perhaps you come up with something. But let's carry on with the story. We're told that tajir is 4 letters. Ta, alif, jim, ra. The first letter ta comes from taqwa, God consciousness. Be aware that Allah watches over you. Right? The other one is amana. Alif from amana. Trustworthiness. And the other one is jim for jar'a. Jasara, courage. You cannot make business without courage. You have to decide and make a deal. Right? You may lose, you may win. So business people, successful ones, they are the ones who can take risks. And the last one is rahmah, mercy. You don't cheat the other person. You don't hoard your goods waiting for it to go up, because you think of the other. You are merciful. These characteristics, the Omanis used to have this. They invaded these parts of the world without any arms. They don't need arms. This is the most important weapon, right? Islam goes through husnul muamala. The characteristic of business was the excellence in dealing, in muamala, in dealing. When you observe these, I give you an example of a recent thing happened in Paris. One of the businessmen, a Moroccan businessman, he was he's a greengrocer. He sells green and apples and so on, and tomatoes and meat. And he has an accountant firm to look after his accounts, so that they sort out the accounts, submit to the government, and say how much tax he has to pay. The people who came to him to sort out the accounts, they discovered that he is declaring everything, and his business is cash. He gets cash. He doesn't even give any receipt. He doesn't register. But this cash, he declares everything, every franc. So the lady in charge of this business, the accounting business, wanted to know, why is he doing this? She wanted to go and see him. She wanted to see him and says to him, excuse me, sir, I tell you, whispering in his ears, we accountants can help you to reduce your tax. But we want to tell you one thing, ask you, why do you have to declare all the cash? You can hide half of the cash away, nobody will know, and then you only declare one half. He says, what do you mean nobody will know? She said, government will not know. He said, but there is somebody who will know. She said, what do you mean? He says, Allah will know. Allah knows. She says she was shocked. She could not believe. And she says that, if all business people behave in this way, there will be no need for tax people, muraqabah and things. There will be no need for policemen. It'll be like paradise on earth. If you have everybody has his own heart and his own conscience to be, this reminds me of that. There are people who are actually like this. Now, of course, he's living in Paris. He's not in Morocco, he's in Paris. Some people want to say, okay, it's allowed to cheat the kafir. No. He says, I have been entrusted. I'm allowed here because people trust me and they expect me to pay my tax. So he pays his tax. If Muslims behave like he does in France. France will have become Muslim a long time ago. So